The Humvee's brakes squealed as the driver downshifted to take a sharp right. Then we came to a stop. "All right, gents, you know the drill," Sergeant Stafford yelled out. This was the 19th house search we'd had today, and quite frankly, we were all getting sick of it. My boots hit the sand, and I slung my rifle over, getting a good grip on it. An exhalation of exhaustion and boredom was heard from all the guys as we approached the door. "You think we'll catch this one red-handed, Ellis?" Ray grinned at me. "Oh yeah, pants around his ankles and all. God, I felt embarrassed for that guy." We stacked up for our routine formation at the door. Corporal Martinez approached the front, lowering his rifle. He took a quick charge up and punted the door wide open. "Move, move, move!" I swung around the right corner, scanning the area, and I had Ray on my rear checking the front. It was a kitchen area. Busted cupboards, disgusting-looking tiles. The whole place reeked of old carpet and mold. I felt Ray's hand on my rig, indicating for me to press on. I rushed forward in a controlled manner and felt the 6 pairs of footsteps trailing behind me. The living room was clear, and we headed for the stairs, located at the far left. I heard some rummaging upstairs, so I indicated to Sergeant Stafford in the rear to swap me out. I quickly rushed along the right side of the column, swapping with Private Ashford, who carried the team's big-ass shotgun. Ashford excitedly raised his weapon, waiting for the tap. I was now in the 4th position, carefully threading into the stack. My eyes were constantly darting left and right, looking for the open back door or window or what have you. We started moving up the stairs, hugging the wall tightly. Reaching the turn in the staircase, Ashford confidently swung the corner. Having a little visibility over Mendez's shoulder, I saw him freeze. His face turned pale in a matter of seconds, the clacking of his rifle sling indicating his violent shaking. Ashford moved to the fore, 6 shots fired in the direction of something upstairs. Contact! Private Watford swung around Ashford to provide greater suppression fire and move up the stairs to unclog the stack. An ear-piercing sound came from upstairs, the chaos ensuring the formation was disoriented, along with the noise, and I began to feel nauseous. Grabbing Martinez's collar, I tugged him down the stairs to free the staircase for engagement. As we were moving down the stairs, I caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a woman, entirely covered in bullet holes, dashing towards Ashford. Click, click, click. His gun ran dry, and it was already too late. The hellish creature, dripping blood and having a few pieces of meat barely holding its limbs together, closed the distance between him and snapped his neck with an inhuman amount of force. A magazine dumped by Watford led him to the same fate. Having it turned towards us, I caught some details of what it looked like. Its face was hollow, cheeks sunken in, eye sockets empty. Saying it was pale would be an understatement. Freakishly skinny and tall, completely destroyed by bullet holes. Its nails were probably the size of half a knife. Our whimpers and curses were muffled by the sound of the automatic fire and ejecting magazines. It was not phased. "Get down!" The familiar sound of a grenade being ejected from the grenade launcher tube echoed from behind me. I dove to the left, managing to pull Martinez down just in time, and an explosion followed. Then it was just darkness. My ears were ringing, face full of dust. Aching pain in my left leg stuck as I attempted to get up. I slowly opened my eyes, glaring at the flickering light from the ceiling. I glanced to my right, but Martinez wasn't there. That's when I spotted all the bodies. Sergeant Stafford, Corporal Smith, PFC Arethus. I whimpered in fear as I dragged my ass towards the wall, breathing heavily. I felt my rifle under my right hand and gripped it tight. Another detailed look towards the deceased, and I spotted Martinez too. Hunched over on a chair, head hung backwards, throat slashed open. Ray. I didn't see Ray anywhere. I had to find him. I pulled myself up, nearly collapsing. A quick glance down towards my knee revealed the issue. A huge piece of debris had lodged itself in there. I pulled it out, letting out a groan and a few quick breaths. Dragging that leg behind and pushing myself off the wall, I started moving upstairs. "Ray! Where are you, man?" I turned the corner of the stairs and realized why Ashford froze. The upstairs area was a large living room. In there, neatly arranged, were about 14 to 15 chairs. Sitting in them with perfect posture were corpses. The corpses of recon squads that went missing earlier today. In the farthest chair to the right, I spotted Ray. He was alive. I started making my way up the stairs, and I saw his eyes widen and his lips attempt to say something. "I'm coming, man. Just hold on." "Ellis, on the ceiling." My blood ran cold and my eyes widened. In a split second, my heart rate doubled, and I was clenching my jaw so hard I could have easily broken it. Slowly, raising my glance and rifle towards the ceiling, I saw it. Head slightly tilted to the right, hanging onto the ceiling with those ridiculously long legs. Its thinning hair hung down, drenched in blood, inches from my face. It let out a sickening gurgle or a groan before striking at me. I woke up in one of those chairs. I glanced to my left and noticed Ray wasn't there. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the next room. I dove out the window and crawled away, giving it a quick glance backwards. It was staring at me, its hollow face replicating what would have been a smile on a human. Its arms moved up, raising something. I caught a glance of a familiar blonde head. "Ray, I'm so sorry, man." The house was a small, two-story affair, with white siding on the bottom floor and gray shingles on the top. 3 windows were facing the street, a large picture window, a small, rectangular one above that, and another large window below it. I got out of my car and walked towards the door, knocking twice before it opened. A woman stood there, wearing a blue dress with her hair tied back in a bun. She had bright green eyes that seemed to sparkle when she saw me standing outside her house. "Hello," she said cheerfully. Her voice was soft, but carried well through the night air. "Hi, are you Miss Tanner?" She nodded. "Yes, I am." She smiled again and stepped aside so I could enter the house. It smelled odd inside. Not bad or anything like that, just strange, like old books and dust. "Please come in." I entered her living room. It wasn't much more than a couch and a coffee table, an end table with a lamp on it. That's all I really needed for a place to sleep. The walls were painted yellow, which looked nice against the dark furniture. The carpet was black and covered most of the hardwood floors. There was a small kitchen off to the side of the living room with a sink, a stove, and a fridge. Everything was clean and tidy. "Sorry for the mess," she said, while pointing to some boxes stacked in the corner. "My husband died last year, and I just haven't had the time to get around to moving everything yet." "No problem. I don't mind sleeping in a bit of mess." She chuckled. "Well, if you want to put your things away, feel free. Just make sure not to take too long, since I have to leave in a few hours." "Okay, thank you." "You're welcome. I'll be right back." She disappeared down a hallway. As I looked around the room, I noticed something else odd about the house. The walls weren't straight. They bulged outward here and there like they'd been pushed from the inside out by someone, pushing their way through them. It was subtle enough that it didn't bother me at first, but as I looked closer, I realized that it wasn't just the walls. Every single surface in the entire house had these little imperfections, including the ceiling and the floor. I heard footsteps coming down the hall and turned to see Miss Tanner returning with 2 glasses filled with water. She handed me one and took a seat on the couch across from me. "So, what brings you out this way?" she asked as she sipped her drink. "I'm looking for a friend of mine. He went missing in the area about a month ago." "Oh, that's dreadful. What happened?" "He just vanished." I paused as I thought about how to explain. "He was staying in an abandoned hotel nearby and never came back. We think he might have gotten lost in the woods." She shook her head sadly. "That's awful. Is there any chance he survived? Maybe ran away somewhere?" "I don't know. I hope so." She sighed heavily and leaned back on the couch. "I'm sorry. I wish I could help you find him." We sat quietly for a few moments before she spoke up again. "I don't mean to pry, but are you sure he isn't still alive? Maybe he's hiding somewhere or something." "Well, maybe," I said hesitantly. "Do you have any idea where he might have gone?" "I'm not sure, but I have a hunch." She laughed softly and shook her head. "Well, let me know if you hear anything about him. I'll keep my ears open as well." "Thanks. I better get some sleep now," I said, standing up from the couch. "Of course. I'll show you to your room." I downed the glass of water and placed it on the table. Even that seemed crooked. "Thanks again for letting me stay here." "You're more than welcome. Please feel free to use anything in the kitchen if you need anything." "I will." I followed her down the hallway to a staircase leading to the second floor. At the top of those stairs was another hallway that led to 3 doors, one on each side and one at the end. She pointed to the door on the left. "That one's yours. No one else is staying this weekend, so other doors will be locked." She opened the door to my room and flicked a light switch. There was a dresser opposite the bed with a window above it, and a small bed with a nightstand next to it. The wall behind the bed was covered in posters of famous horror movies, slasher flicks mostly. "This should be all set up for you." She motioned towards the bed. "Make yourself comfortable. My room is on the 3rd floor if you need anything." "Thank you. I'll keep that in mind." She walked over to the door at the end of the hall and closed it behind her before disappearing into her own room. I took a look around my room before lying down on the bed. The sheets were clean and smelled nice, but I couldn't tell whether they'd been washed recently or not. As I got under them, I noticed something strange about them. They felt heavy, like they were weighted down on one side. When I tried to lift them up, they wouldn't budge. I rolled over on my back and pulled at them, but still no give. Something was definitely wrong with this place. I lay there staring at the ceiling for a while before drifting off into a deep but restless sleep. I woke up sometime later to a knocking on the other side of my door. I sat up and rubbed my eyes before standing up from the bed. "Who is it?" I called out, walking over to the door. There was no answer. I unlocked the door and cracked it open. It was dark outside, but the moon was bright enough that I could see everything clearly. I stepped out into the hallway and saw nothing except darkness. "Hello?" I called again, but once again there was no response. "Is someone there?" I asked as I turned around slowly. I heard another knock from behind me, and spun around only to catch sight of Miss Tanner standing in the doorway to her room. Her hair had fallen loose from her bun and hung down past her shoulders. She was wearing a white tank top and blue pajama pants with red stripes down them. She looked like she was trying to hide herself by covering her face with her hands, which were pressed against her cheeks. "Miss Tanner?" She didn't say anything, continuing to stare at me with wide eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked as I approached her. She nodded, but kept her head down. What's happened?" I asked as I reached out to touch her shoulder. She flinched away from my hand and backed up until she hit the wall behind her. Then, without saying a word, she ran down the hallway and disappeared into the shadows. I stood there for several seconds, dumbfounded by what had happened. What the hell had I just witnessed? Was it real? Or was it just one of those dreams or hallucinations brought on by stress or exhaustion? I went back inside my room and locked the door behind me. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and checked the time. It was after midnight. I'd been asleep for hours. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the poster of Friday the 13th hanging on the wall above the desk. Why would Miss Tanner act like that? And why would she try to hide from me when I touched her? It made no sense. I sighed heavily and laid back down on the bed. I wanted to go back to sleep, but I knew I couldn't fall asleep now. Not until I figured out what was going on here. Maybe if I waited long enough, she'd come back out and explain herself. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because suddenly I was shaken awake by someone pounding on the door. "Wake up!" I jumped up from the bed and opened the door to find Miss Tanner standing in front of me, with her hands balled into fists at her side. "What's wrong?" "Get dressed. You have to leave right now," she said frantically as she began to pace back and forth. "Why?" "You don't know how dangerous this place is. Get your things and get out, now." "What are you talking about?" She stopped pacing and looked me dead in the eye. "The house is cursed." "What?" "It's haunted. There are spirits in this house." I laughed nervously and shook my head. "There aren't any ghosts here." "Then what do you call that thing you saw earlier tonight?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied. Was she talking about herself? I'm not leaving until I get some answers. Please, just go. If you stay here much longer, something bad will happen to you, just like your friend. My friend? Just go, she yelled. She started running downstairs. Wait, I shouted after her, but it was too late. She was already halfway up the steps before she turned around and glared at me. Tell me what happened. He died, she said simply. How? They got him. Who? The monsters. I blinked at her and tried to process what she was telling me. Monsters? Yes, the monsters. They came through the walls and they took him away. Are you insane? I screamed at her. There's no such thing as ghosts or monsters. She frowned at me and shook her head. There are more things than just that. Then she pointed to the floor below us. You need to leave right now before they come for you next. I can't leave. My friend might be here somewhere. He could still be alive. She let out a frustrated sigh and walked over to the window. She pushed aside the curtains and looked outside. The moon was bright enough that I could see everything clearly. I followed her gaze out the window and saw nothing except for darkness. She pulled open the window and leaned out into the night air. He's leaving, she called out into the darkness. I heard a low growl coming from what sounded like inside the walls. Miss Tanner slowly backed away from the window. Then, without warning, she fell backwards onto the ground. Her body hit the floor with a sickening crunch and didn't move again. I stood there, staring at Miss Tanner's broken form lying on the floor for several seconds, before turning around and sprinting down the stairs. The whole house began to creak and moan, and it appeared as if the walls were closing in on me. I ran past the kitchen and the living room, both of which appeared to be untouched, and headed towards the front door. The only light came from the moon shining through the windows of the hallway. As I approached the exit, I felt something grab hold of my shoulder and pull me back. I spun around quickly to see a figure standing in the shadows behind me. It was tall and thin, with oily skin and long black hair. Its face was covered by a mask made of human bones. I struggled against its grip, but couldn't break free. The walls looked as if they were melting, and more human bone-masked faces were emerging from all around me, surrounding me on all sides and closing in on me until I couldn't breathe. I reached out to touch one of them, but only grabbed hold of empty air. Then suddenly, I was dragged back through the walls, felt myself descending into that pitch-black abyss beneath me. I woke up gasping for breath and sat right up in bed. My heart was racing and my body was soaked with sweat. There was a loud bang on the door and I jumped out of bed. I unlocked the door and opened it slightly, just enough to see who was knocking. But when I did, I wasn't surprised to see Mrs. Tanner standing there with her hands balled into fists at her side. Get dressed. You have to leave right now. I don't have much time, so if things sound a little weird, just bear with me. This is a warning. If you see black clouds at all, just run. Doesn't matter where you are. I don't know if this thing is spreading. I'm getting ahead of myself. On April 5th, my wife and I took off for a wedding in Vermont. Before we left, we heard the news talk about a big northeastern storm that's going to drop a bunch of snow and ice. Even though it looks like we're going to be okay since our plane is landing technically in New Hampshire, just south of the storm. The flight was 2 hours, but about halfway through the trip, the clouds started to change color. Not gray like you'd expect. Darker, more like black, looking more like volcanic ash clouds than normal storm clouds. My wife was busy playing her Nintendo Switch, but since I was laid off, I had a lot on my mind. I was a little surprised that nobody else noticed it, but off in the distance, I could have sworn I saw something move in the distance. It was hard to tell. It sort of looks like a wing swooping through the clouds, like a fish that makes 180s at the surface. The pressure wake pushed the clouds outward, like something was coming and then changed its mind. It had to be a trick of the eye, probably. It had to be the sun hitting and reflecting away off the ash clouds. I shouldn't have been assuming they were ash clouds, but time proved me right. The pilot never made any announcement, and I didn't really see anything either, so I kept my mouth shut. Maybe if I hadn't, things would have turned out different for Courtney. When I looked away, I happened to catch one of the flight attendants staring at her. Her head slightly tilted, and she wouldn't take her eyes off of me. It sounds strange, but it felt like she was waiting to see if I was about to tell my wife what I had seen. I decided to keep looking busy, and even decided to shut my eyes for a few minutes. Thinking she had just seen something might distract the old veteran stewardess' attention. It had to be about 10 minutes because I listened to my favorite song twice and another song before opening my eyes. And to my shock, she was still looking at me. Now, her teeth looked different, like she was trying hard to smile. I swear it looked like her gums were bleeding. I decided to get up and go to the bathroom, the one farthest from her. That must have done the trick, because when I came back, she had moved on to her normal duties of serving passengers. When I got back, my wife finally noticed the black clouds, but by this time we could barely see past the wing. Did the pilots see anything? Not wanting to worry her, I assured her they have all kinds of communications and radar. Even if they can't see in front of them, they know where they're going. She gave me a look. Courtney was like that. She could see right through me like an MRI machine. The fasten seatbelt sign came on, and with it, the pilot's voice. "Attention travelers, we'll be making our final descent momentarily. Please make sure all loose items are stored, as you won't be needing them." What's that mean? That was weird. I looked around, and thankfully, someone else, who I would shortly find out was our air marshal for the flight, stood up and headed for the cockpit, his face a mask of concern. He shut the drapes behind him, so no one could see him. I heard him knocking loudly and asking to be let in. Just then, the stewardess from earlier rushed by me, running against my arm. Suddenly, my arm was in drastic pain. I looked down, and it looked like someone had taken a cheese grater to it. My wife looked to try and help me. "Oh, God, are you okay? What happened?" I told her I wasn't sure and started pressing dirty paper towels and Skittles wrappers on my wound to stop the bleeding. My wife yelped for help. Other people started looking, and in the confusion, nobody else saw the air marshal struggling, except me, as he was pulled into the bathroom by the stewardess. Except she now looked more like a demon, with black scales on the forearms of her lethal hands and sharp claws. There was panic on the man's face, or maybe it was pain. I don't know. Just as the door shut, I could see the man's skin turning red as if it were being burned off by a torch, or whatever that thing pretending to be a stewardess was. Before I could tell anyone to look, the air marshal disappeared into the airplane bathroom. By this time, my wife had noticed my face and looked up front, but she didn't see anything. "Are you okay?" I tried to tell her something. It took the air marshal, but she just looked at me in confusion. And that was when the gunshot rang out in the cabin. The bullets began flying out of the bathroom from where the air marshal had been dragged. His screams were guttural. He must have gotten loose, but he never made it out. More bullets went off, and everyone scattered. Several shots hit the cockpit, and luckily they didn't penetrate the bulletproof door. Unfortunately, one of the bullets did shoot out the pressurized windows. The next few minutes were a blur. Everyone was panicking, and with no direction, everyone braced for the inevitable. I looked out the window just as we were about to hit. We were through the clouds, and what I was seeing wasn't New Hampshire. It looked like some kind of hellscape. Lava rivers and large mounds in the distance, horned monstrosities roaming the outskirts of the airport. The barbed wire fencing that lay more like fences made from rubber or skin, and the buildings were covered in ash and strange demonic symbols. After that, it was only blackness. I came to eventually, hanging and nearly falling out of my seat. I appeared to be only a few feet off the ground, and I was alone. My wife's seat was broken clean off. I can't see her, and I don't see anyone else living. I prepared myself and unlatched the seatbelt. I tucked and managed to save my 33-year-old ankles when I hit the ground. I stood up, letting my bearings hit me, when I finally got to look around and noticed there was no sun. It should have been there. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but it looks like midnight out there. Alone and scared, I tried calling out, but I was afraid to draw the attention of those giant monsters I'd seen just before the crash. Just then, I heard a girl screaming. Instinct kicked in, and I ran to help. I jumped over to the debris and body parts from the passengers. All I could think was that it might be Courtney, and I had to do something. I rounded one of the plane engines that was on fire, and I wish I didn't see what I had witnessed next. An early 20s Gen Z girl covered in dirt, her face cut and badly bleeding. So bad I couldn't tell if she still had her eyes. But then the worst of it finally hit me when I realized what she was doing. She was feeling for her legs, or her lack thereof. She cried out, screaming for her mother, while she grabbed at the stumps of what had been her legs. I have to admit I was scared. I was in shock. How could I help her? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't let her suffer alone. I took a step when suddenly I heard another woman, but this one wasn't screaming. She was laughing. Suddenly, a beautiful, terrifying demon woman walked around the corner, and with her came 2 tiny crawling demons. "Oh, my child, save your screams. We're just getting started." With that, she snapped her fingers, and I watched as the demons tore into the poor girl. Her screams drew more of the demon dogs. "The more you despair, the more you will suffer. Embrace the suffering, and you will be released from it." The girl cried as best she could as the monster tore into her throat, but with one last breath, she must have gave her what the demon wanted. Suddenly, they were surrounded in black smoke and disappeared. The demon dogs, the demon woman, and the girl, all gone. I was left alone among the debris, the death, the ash-filled air. I didn't know what to do. I found a place to hide. I thought this was hell. Found out later, it wasn't. After having a breakdown under the debris of the crashed plane and still having no idea if my wife was even alive, I had this weird feeling that I had to keep going. It just kept saying, keep alive, keep moving. I can hear those demon dogs coming. I need to be fast. Sometime after my encounter, I heard something loud and deep. It was familiar somehow, though. It sounded like an engine, a plane. I ran through piles of debris and burning cars, planes, cruise ships, and buses. I got to the top of the debris mound just in time to see a 747 punch through the clouded barrier. This one landed just like it was supposed to. I looked up and noticed flying demons scattering as the plane hooked the terminal gate. Just then, the hundreds of demons surrounding the tarmac shrieked like they were welcoming something. Just then, from a shadowy hole in the ground, a giant snake erupted. The giant snake-like creature slithered around the plane like a boa constrictor, preparing to suffocate its prey. The doors opened, and immediately I could hear people screaming for their lives. I watched as a humanoid demon dressed like a pilot in a torn uniform, with random horns tearing its suit of skin off. It was like it was wearing a costume. It started throwing passengers off the plane. Demon dogs and other emaciated humanoid demon things began to swarm the passengers. A middle-aged man in a $5,000 suit, he screamed as the creatures tore his clothes off and he was carried into the main terminal. He swung his suitcase like a weapon. Just before he disappeared, one of the smallest humanoid demons jumped up and bit down on his wrist, stopping him from injuring any of the rest of them with that metal suitcase. I could hear him scream even louder, begging for help and to be let go. Before he vanished into the terminal, I saw the little demon tear the guy's hand off. Was that where they took Courtney, I wondered? I navigated my way inside. I don't know why. I put myself through these sights of something in me just kept demanding that I move forward. Like I had to see it. I watched as all the passengers from the plane, buses, the people who had just got lost on car rides ended up here. They were sorted onto paths that were surrounded by barbed wire. Come on, you meat sacks, it's time to get sorted out. Which one of you is one of us, and which one of you is for the meat grinder? One of the sick-looking demons with a sharp pike yelled at these poor souls, shuffling them through the giant rotating spikes, just like TSA instructing passengers to go through security. Demon guards pushed each person towards the front of the line, where a larger demon would look at each person to classify them. Aviation, infantry, necrotics, this one has spirit. Training pits, we'll beat that out of you, or we'll eat you. The guy looked like a soldier type. Broad shoulders, tattoos, looked like someone from a movie, with the army guys in Benghazi. One by one, people were chosen for roles in Hell's forces. As far as I can tell, there was a small percent of prisoners that the demons didn't want anything to do with, which I thought was pretty weird. Wouldn't everyone make a good soldier? I never got my answer. One of the flying demons landed near the ventilation duct I was hiding in, and I needed to sneak away. I made my way through the vents. To my relief, nothing was in there with me. At least nothing that ever found me. Eventually, I found my way to the airport authority office. It looked guarded. Several bear-type looking guys and big old demons that guarded the door. Using the vents, I quietly snuck in and found what appeared to be a map with some demon casting a spell over the airport. On the giant omnidirectional map, I could see a bubble around the airport. At first I thought it was hiding this place. Whatever that thing in the airport authority office is, it's how they're cloaking the airport, and the demons are building an army with our own people. I don't know how, but somehow in this office I have signal. Maybe it's how no one knows this place is gone. I don't know. I don't know anything up until an hour ago. I didn't even believe in hell. If anyone gets this message, you need to tell everyone about this demon cloaking this place. If it's something more than turning people into demons, I don't know, but we have to save these people. Every plane that lands is either adding more soldiers to the enemy ranks or enslaving more innocent souls. The worst part is, the planes are leaving. Who's on them? I don't know, but they can't be human. I'm gonna keep exploring. I can't explain this feeling, but something is telling me that Courtney's not far. I'm gonna find out as much as I can and come back here to relay what I can. This has to be the start of something. My ex-husband always used to jump scare me. It was one of the things I hated the most about him. Well, he's doing it again. The most frustrating part is that he's been dead for 5 years. First, it was just slightly off-putting. It was in the earliest days of dating him. He'd be at my apartment, and I'd excuse myself to use the bathroom. He'd be waiting in some doorway or shadow to jump out and scare the crap out of me. It was even worse at his house. He lived way out in the middle of nowhere, and I was pretty much always low-level scared out there. But then he'd leap out from around a corner, and I'd be so scared I'd pee myself. I'd be ready to break up with him then and there, every time. In retrospect, that's obviously what I should have done. But I guess we all ignore our own inner voices sometimes, don't we? Well, obviously, or there wouldn't be so many people posting on No Sleep, trying to get other people to help them with dire problems they created by doing something stupid. Yet, here we are. I don't know why I let it slide, honestly. And that was only one of the many things about him that was terrible. Nonetheless, I repeatedly told him to cut it out, and I repeatedly did nothing when he failed to cut it out. Eventually, I even married him. He had 2 kids from a previous marriage who stayed with us a lot. And when they were there were also nieces and nephews staying over. I always liked when there was a house full of kids. It made the old, drafty, falling-down farmhouse we lived in slightly less terrifying. But you could count on my ex-husband to screw up a good thing. We were in the living room with all the kids. It was late at night. The kids were all still rowdy and playing around, he and I on the couch. There was a scary movie playing, which nobody was really paying any attention to.
But Eric, my ex, got a funny look on his face and said quietly to me, "Watch this." Then he put his fingers to his lips to express that I should keep quiet. I instantly knew he was probably thinking of orchestrating some huge jump scare on all these kids. Even though he had actually given me a warning at least, I just didn't want him to do it. The youngest kid was only 4. I knew it would immediately kill the good vibes. I tried to protest, but he shushed me again, then scurried off to some other part of the house, unnoticed by any of the kids. I sighed angrily. I even tried to warn the kids, but they were all hyper and not really listening. Seconds later, Eric showed up outside the screen door and revved his chainsaw. The kids lost it. One of his daughters actually blasted backwards and got airborne in her desperation to get away from the door. The 4-year-old, of course, burst into hysterical tears, and soon they were all crying. Now, some of you reading this are probably laughing and thinking that's actually pretty funny. But the thing was, it was just so damn old. He did this dumb crap all the time. Plus, the world can really be boiled down into precisely 2 types of people. People who think it's funny to scare 4-year-olds so they cry, and people who don't. So, readers, I suppose you've sorted yourselves into teams at this point. Fast forward a few years from the dumbass chainsaw incident, and Eric and I had a son of our own. The thing about our son was that he had major, and I mean major, heart problems at birth. He had to have open heart surgery, and he had a slew of other complications. No, that's not the point of the story, but just know that the first 8 months of his life were very touch and go. Then he was finally doing better, stronger even, able to do more. He was 9 months old, sitting on my lap, facing me. We were playing and chatting with each other when Eric lunged up behind me, grabbed him, and shouted. My little son did that thing little kids do when, for one full second, you don't know if they're going to burst into hysterical tears or laughter. In the end, my son burst into laughter. So did Eric. I, on the other hand, was livid. Who jump scares an infant, first of all? Secondly, who the hell jump scares an infant heart patient? That was probably the rudest I've ever been to Eric about the jump scare thing. But he just kept laughing the whole thing off, like he always did. Anyway, that wasn't why I divorced him, but we were divorced by the time our son was 3. We shared custody, and it went about how you'd expect things to go with a douchebag. But life proceeded, I suppose. When our son was about 10, he went through this phase where he started getting insanely jumpy. I mean, he just seemed incredibly paranoid. If I walked close to him or made any sudden movements, he'd flinch, almost like he thought I was going to hit him. At first, it actually sort of hurt my feelings. I had never hit my son. I didn't understand why he was being so jumpy with me. Then it started to scare me, because I wondered if someone else was hitting him. Maybe he was being bullied at school. He didn't go to his father's much at all, and I didn't imagine Eric would ever hit him. But, what if? Then I remembered the jump scaring. I finally thought to ask my son about it. He immediately revealed that, yeah, his dad jump scared him. All the time. It's kind of annoying, Mom, he told me. Well, yeah, I thought. I couldn't believe I'd forgotten about it. I was so mad. He only spent limited time with our son. Why was Eric spending it jump scaring him so much that it was making him nervous and anxious all the time? What kind of crap was that? The problem was that Eric was the sort of co-parent that if I asked him for help with anything, or to back me up on anything, he'd do the exact opposite, just to be spiteful. Asking nicely never worked with him. So, if it wasn't something court-ordered, I didn't even really bother asking, because I knew he would just get worse. And let's face it, no family court is going to give a crap about somebody getting scared. I was mad as hell, but there wasn't really much I could do about it. Fortunately, he took the liberty of dying, and that took care of it. I don't mean to sound callous. Obviously, our son struggled with the death of his father, but the jumpiness subsided basically instantly, after he found out that his dad was dead. Now, if your child's mental health improves because you die, it's probably because you were a crappy parent. I'm just saying. Anyway, another 5 years went by. Then I wrecked my car because a cat jumped out in front of me. I sat there in shock, gripping the steering wheel of my wrecked car. As I tried to catch my breath and make sense of what had happened, I noticed something strange. The air around me had grown cold, and a chill ran down my spine. I looked around, but no one was there. I tried to shake it off and focus on getting out of the car. But then I heard it. A low, guttural laugh echoed around me, and I froze. It sounded like my ex-husband's laugh, the man who had tormented me for years, emotionally and physically. I felt a surge of anger and fear wash over me, and I knew I needed to get out of there. I managed to escape the car and run to my house, but the eerie feeling never left me. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. I would hear footsteps in the hallway, even though no one was there. Objects would move on their own, and the temperature would drop suddenly. As I walked by the window glass on the shop on a sunny day, my own reflection seemed to lunge at me, and it scared the life out of me. A drinking glass exploded on the counter. Doors slammed in the night. Books fell from the shelves, landing with a thunk and a plume of dust. As the days passed, I realized that it wasn't just any spirit haunting me. It was my ex-husband. He was using his new ghostly powers to jump scare me from beyond the grave. The realization left me terrified. If he could do all this, what else was he capable of? I tried to find help, but no one believed me. They thought I was just imagining things or suffering from post-traumatic stress. Sleep-deprived and desperate, I found myself in a police station, explaining the whole thing to a frazzled cop. He glared at me tersely, and I ended up feeling like an idiot. A gunshot rang out even as I told my story. The entire precinct jumped at what ended up being a gun going off by accident. Even so, the cop didn't believe me, of course, and sent me out into the rainy night, terrified of my own shadow. I was alone, trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't escape from. Now, as I sit here in my dark and silent house, I can feel his presence all around me. I was awoken moments ago when the bedroom door cracked violently into the wall. I know that at any minute he could jump scare me again, and this time I fear it won't be a harmless prank. I'm sitting here curled in a ball, shaking as I type this. I'm just trying to get it out, trying to leave behind my story, because I know it's only a matter of time until he scares me to death.
On the day that my friend and I went searching for the Catawanga, I lay in a field of cotton-spun dandelions and roasted in the evil gleam of the sun. It was one of the dog days of summer, when all the shadows are golden and the days never end. It just runs languidly onward like a paint smear. The sky was pristine blue of a hydrangea flower, without a cloud in sight. Every so often, Elliot would leap up excitedly, claiming he could see a cloud forming, but it was always a plane or a trick of the light or a runaway dandelion waltzing through the air. Chris grabbed Elliot's ankle as he went to jump up again and shoved him back onto the grass. "There's no goddamn clouds." "Language?" Elliot looked mildly offended. Chris snorted. He was a football player through and through, with huge shoulders and a temper to match. So I quickly got up in the hopes of heading off a confrontation. "I'm bored. Let's go play catch or something." Chris started to agree, but paused. A dangerous light came into his eyes, and I was immediately afraid. According to Chris, his ideas were brilliant. According to literally anyone else, they were insane. Like the time he'd suspended the school weeb, Peter, from a tree branch to see if the squirrels would eat him. Peter had hung him there like an overweight flag for 6 hours. "Have you guys heard of the Catawanga?" He stared straight at Elliot as he said it. "I heard that it lurks in the old Fairground and eats bad kids who wander off. It's got the eyes of a snake, and it ties the bones of its victims into its fur. Little Willie's cousin saw it, and he said it has claws like... Chris fumbled for the right words. Knives, I suggested. Yeah, like knives. There's no such thing. It's probably some animal. Elliot didn't sound very sure of himself, though. Of course, I knew about the Catawanga. Everybody in town knew about it. The stories were many and conflicting. In some, it was a great dragon who hoarded the skulls of children and only brought them out during rainy nights to admire them in the light of the moon. In others, the Catawanga was a great man-beast abandoned by his family, bitter and afraid of the world. But always, it lived in the abandoned fairground, and always, it was very, very hungry. In my town's heyday, people came from all over the world to see the famous Grenadine Circus, open all year round and fun for the whole family. But that was a long time ago. What I knew about the circus came from the old geezers clustered around the creaky folding tables, telling stories about their youth. Everyone knew that half those stories were made up, and the other half, well, they might as well be. But I had always been fascinated by the circus. Or rather, I was fascinated by the way all the adults treated it. The Catawanga was not regarded as one of the harmless legends for the little kids to tell when they were warm and safe around the campfire. To my parents, to the parents of all the other kids that I knew, the Catawanga was real, and the circus was to be avoided at all costs. The Catawanga isn't real, Elliot said again, more firmly. Probably everyone freaked out about a cougar or a tiger or a really hairy guy. We don't get those around here, I hesitated. Well, we do get hairy people, but I've never seen any predators bigger than that ugly babysitter of yours. The last remark was directed at Chris. Right, everybody shut up. I'm going to the fairground, and y'all are chicken if you don't come. Under the dire threat of being called a chicken, Elliot and I followed Chris as he confidently strolled away. My town was given a name by the 20-somethings who lived there, the ones who were too old to be satisfied with the tiny lives they lived here, but too young to accept that big lives were meant for big kids born in big cities far away from people that believed in Catawangas. The 20-somethings called my town Satan's Soul because it was so small. My friends and I made it to the fairground in less than 10 minutes. Vines twined up the poles that held up a sign which proudly proclaimed Grenadine Circus. It was barely recognizable. It had decaying wooden things that might once have been stalls, ground covered in leaves that crunched at every step, and anthills. Lots and lots of anthills. Chris smacked his meaty palms together. Let's go hunt us some Catawanga meat. Elliot rolled his eyes. We walked into the circus together, because when we actually got there, Chris didn't seem all that keen to go first. Elliot trailed his fingers over a row of half-submerged cages. I wonder where all the animals went when the circus shut down. There was a crashing sound to the side. Elliot and I looked over to see a half-exposed basement with a ladder leading down into it. Chris moaned at the bottom. I rushed up, sliding down the ladder, and grabbed at Chris. Dude, are you all right? He started crying, great sobbing gasps that gradually transformed into hysterical laughter. You should have seen your face. Chris stood up and dusted himself off, pleased at his prank. I sighed and turned to leave, but growls from the back of the room stopped me. It's probably just the wind. It's just the wind, I said, doing my best to sound sure. But nails scraped along stone, undermining my words. That's it. I'm out. Chris retreated up the ladder. Chicken, Elliot yelled at his back. The Catawanga isn't real. The growls got louder. The Catawanga isn't real. Elliot's face was pale. I'm not leaving. I'm not a chicken. I tried to pull Elliot away, but he stood his ground. The Catawanga isn't real, Elliot screamed into the black of the room, as if he could wish the shadowy shape moving at the back of the room into non-existence. The Catawanga isn't real, and we don't get predators here, and you aren't allowed to be real. He bellowed the words out as if some tiny, important thing was about to be broken, and that was the last thing he could ever say. I glanced at the shape. It was just a lump of shadows in the corner. I grabbed Elliot's arm and decided I didn't want to see it move. I talked to him calmly, projecting what I didn't feel. Elliot, come on, let's go. It'll be okay, Elliot. We have to leave now. Growls bubbled up from behind me. Elliot, move! Elliot's face went pale. He pointed over my shoulder with one trembling finger. The bear was rather pathetic. It lunged for us, but only made it halfway, banging its nose against the ground and whimpering like a petulant child. The bear's fur was falling out in patches. Its eyes were covered with milky white film, and it sniffed the air, trying to find its dinner. All those years of being endlessly crammed onto bicycles and paraded around like an oversized dog, followed by years alone in the fairground, had taken their toll on the creature. Despite that, it was very big and very obviously hungry. But we don't get bears here, I said stupidly. I told you, Elliot whispered. I asked what happened to the circus animals, and now we know. I told you so. I grabbed Elliot by the arm and pulled him out of the basement. As we scrambled up the ladder, I glanced back. The last thing I saw was the faded red collar around the bear's neck, the last remnant of the Grenadine circus. Elliot and I met Chris by the edge of the grounds and told him about the bear. I guess the Catawanga isn't real, just some dumb kids making up stories about a bear. He sounded disappointed, even though he had run away from the bear like he had bees in his pants. Yeah, I guess. I was relieved, though. Something moved in the trees. The wind died down suddenly, and I could just barely hear a scraping that sounded like long, long claws sliding across concrete. The sound got louder and louder, built until I could feel the vibrations in my chest. There was a figure inside the gate, large and bulbous, with limbs protruding at seemingly random angles. One of those limbs held a limp hunk of meat that still had a red collar around its neck. It didn't have a face, but something about the way it lounged there made it seem undeniably smug. Chris wasn't the only one who ran away that time. I never saw the Catawanga again, but as soon as I turned 18, I moved away with no plans and no money. Elliot left too, but Chris stayed. He'd always been stubborn like that. On my 20th birthday, he was found headless just outside the fairgrounds. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. I hope you enjoyed the works of Mantis Shrimp 47, an up-and-comer on Reddit. He's got some other great stories that I'll likely fall back on, and he's generously given me his permission to read his work, so you can look forward to more of him in the future. Let's go ahead and thank our patrons before we sign off. Thanks to Leslie Lou Riddle and Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributors. Thanks to Xaronan for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributor. And thanks to Glenn Jenkins for being our Ghostwriter tier contributor. If you would like to support the show, come on down to Patreon. For just $5 a month, you can have your name read out at the end of every TikTok and every YouTube video that I do. Patrons also get their videos a day early, so you can experience your Wednesday and Friday videos on Tuesday and Thursday, respectively. I have a new compilation coming out in July, so if you'd like to get caught up, follow my link in the comments to Amazon. Or, like Xaronan, you can always sign up to my Ghostly Reader tier, and you get a book signed in your mailbox when I put them out. I can't wait to see more patrons come in as the new books roll out. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.